Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the Dabs of Reality YouTube channel. I'm your host Tom CRAWSHAW and I'm going to tell you today why I fast for up to 23 hours every single day, and also the amazing health benefits and surprising benefits on longevity and all the cool science behind why all this stuff happens. So listen, if you're new here to the channel and you've not hit that subscribe button yet, what are you doing? Go and hit the red button below. I'd massively appreciate your support here. We do videos on spirituality, science, biohacking, psychedelics, and a whole bunch more. So you've probably heard about intermittent fasting, right? So this is where we shorten our eating window. Most people do maybe 6 to 8 hours eating window. So typically you would start eating around 9 a.m. and finish around 5 p.m. But for myself, my eating window has shrunk even further down to is typically between 1 to 3 hours. So you might think that's extreme, but the cool thing is your body gets used to it, and there's some surprising benefits from fasting and also from that hungry feeling that you get. Right? I've actually reframed that gurgling in your stomach and that feeling of hunger into something that's actually quite positive. And this has to do with ghrelin. So we're going to get into that in a little bit later in this video. So some of the benefits of intermittent fasting include switching to ketones for your fuel, for increasing longevity, increasing resistance to disease, to preserve muscle mass, to slow down aging, to enhance performance, and also to optimize physiological functioning. So we're going to get into the science in just a moment, but think about it from an evolutionary perspective. You know, as hunter-gatherers, we'd often go long time periods without food. And those who were most fat adapted, meaning they can switch to fat metabolism quickly and efficiently, may have had an evolutionary advantage over other people who weren't able to make that switch faster and more effectively. Because think about it, if your brain and body can perform optimally when you're in a fasted state, you're going to have an advantage over somebody who's not as well adapted. And this has also led to the proposal that perhaps this intermittent fasting or this starvation led to the development of our superior brain capacities. So Mark Twain once wrote, "A little starvation can really do more for the average sick man than can the best medicines and the best doctors. I do not mean a restricted diet, I mean total abstinence from food for 1 or 2 days. Now, obviously Mark Twain here is referring to an extended fasting period, and I sometimes do 24-hour fasts, kind of by accident. You know, if the meal timing is a bit off one day and I have to eat later on, that could mean that I'm fasting for 24 hours. And I totally agree. Fasting has many health implications and benefits that I don't really have time to go into in this video, but you can do your research, and there's lots of really interesting stuff out there, just really from a detoxification perspective, and the ability for fasting to increase and turn on this process called autophagy, which we're going to get into in just a moment. So what does the science say when we're in the fasted state? So you may have heard about this idea called the metabolic switch. And this is what happens when we switch from glucose, which is our primary fuel source, to ketones. Now the body actually prefers ketones when we're fasting and also during endurance exercise. Now ketones can start being produced in the body anywhere from 12 to 36 hours after your last intake of food. And as you get better and more efficient at making that switch, your body is going to switch into using ketones, which is also called fat metabolism. We're going to use the fatty acids that get broken down from the fat that's stored in our bodies. We're going to make ketones from them, and then we're going to use that ketones as fuel. So if you're more fat adapted, if you can make that switch quicker, then it's going to be more efficient in the long run for you. So the next really important thing that happens is a change in gene expression. So we call this area of study epigenetics, because our DNA has many different buttons, right? Let's imagine levers on a console, and these levers all do certain things. Now, these levers are not all pulled at the same time. Different cells pull different levers, right? We have the epigenetic code, or the epigenetic imprint, that tells the cell which levers to pull. So when we're fasting, certain levers get pulled. So we have two different states of operation. So when glucose is readily available and in high saturation in the body is in a growth and proliferation stage. It's not so much concerned about efficiency, it's not so much concerned about the waste products that are involved in this process. It's just focused on growth. It's got all this fuel, it's going balls to the wall. Conversely, when we fast, our body goes into a protect and repair stage. And this is when autophagy starts to take place. Now I'm going to take you through this process. There's a little bit of science here. I'm going to reference everything that I've been speaking about in this video in the description. So if you want to check out and dive deeper into the studies that I'm referencing here, you can take a look at those links yourself. I'm going to say once again, I'm not a nutrition health expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. So please go out and do your own research. I'm sharing with you what I've found in the literature, but this is pretty common knowledge, pretty well-established science. But I will say a lot of the studies that I've come across specifically for intermittent fasting were using rodent models. But the effects that I've felt myself and the effects that have been confirmed by numerous other people who've been experimenting with this approach seem to have positive results. So what happens when we stop eating? What happens when we fast? Well, naturally our glucose levels are going to drop. We have this DNA, we have this cell in our body called AMPK. This is like the detector. It's detecting the glucose levels in the body. And once the glucose levels drop, this detector is activated. There's also another gene called mTOR, and mTOR is elevated specifically when we ingest proteins, and it's highly elevated with animal proteins in particular. Now, occasional hormetic elevation of mTOR is okay. This is a stressor on the body and we can recover from this. But if we eat too much protein in our diet and too much animal protein, then mTOR is going to remain chronically elevated every time we have a protein-rich meal. So this is something to be aware of, because when mTOR is elevated, then autophagy cannot start. We can't switch into that protect and repair phase, which is so important. Now the science is now showing us that the rest and repair mode of our bodies when autophagy is increased is actually the key to longevity. Right, this is all really new science, but absolutely fascinating. So far what happens is AMPK detects the drop in glucose, that then triggers the inhibition of mTOR, and then mTOR then triggers autophagy. Now, what is autophagy, right? So autophagy literally means to self-eat. So autophagy triggers cells in the body to eat up parts of itself. Now, what the body usually eats is misfolded proteins, waste, and anything that is deemed inefficient. So it's essentially like stripping back the outer layers so we can stimulate growth of new layers, for example. So autophagy basically breaks down any damaged cells, any misfolded proteins. It recycles them and builds newer, healthier versions of them. Now, this process is extremely important for longevity, and it's believed that autophagy is one of the key processes in the body to increase lifespan, and also from a preventative standpoint, preventing things like Alzheimer's and other health conditions. Also, at the same time while you're fasting, a molecule called NAD starts to increase in concentration. Now, this is where a lot of the longevity research is being done. NAD is an extremely important molecule for longevity. So when this molecule increases in concentration in our cells, it triggers the activation of the sirtuins. Now, the sirtuins are what turns on the longevity genes in our body, and they help us make that switch from the growth and proliferation stage to the protection and repair stage. Also, one final thing on NAD is that NAD is responsible for activating proteins that trigger the growth of mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cells, and it's often thought that chronic illness and the diseases that are associated with aging are related to mitochondrial damage. And over time, as the DNA gets damaged and our ability to remember how the mitochondria were functioning in the past reduces the body's ability to create exact replicas of healthy, functioning mitochondrial cells. Again, I've not got time here to go into the specifics of the scientific research on this molecule in particular, but if you want to do some more digging on it, it's absolutely fascinating. We also find that this process reduces inflammation, and in particular, the C-reactive protein gets downregulated. We also see the BDNF, which is the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Bit of a mouthful, but essentially what this does, it assists with dendritic growth and also growth of new neurons. Obviously this is great because our brains are plastic, and if we want to learn, grow, develop ideas, consolidate and problem solve, it's really important that we have this activity and this ability to continue to grow and develop new connections in the brain. It's also thought that BDNF plays a major role in preventing neurological diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. So essentially what we're talking about here is neuroprotective effects through hormetic stress. So this is periodic stress that our body is able to respond to and bounce back from and get stronger in the process. Just like you would if you went to the gym, right? You go and you lift some weights, you tear some muscle fibers, and they grow back stronger than they were before. It's the same process that's happening when autophagy is triggered, and we increase the neuroprotective effect through increased BDNF in the brain. Cool, so hopefully all that makes sense. We've got some mechanisms going on in the body when we start fasting, as neuroprotective effects, mitochondrial biogenesis, we have muscle preservation, and we have this process of autophagy that is recycling and rebuilding cells in our body. So what about me? What's my experience been like fasting for 22, 23 hours every day? Well, you might think that it's quite difficult, that why would you want to put yourself through that? I love eating so much. But here's the thing, sure, you're gonna get hungry at breakfast time and at lunchtime, but this is just the ghrelin that's playing the role here. Ghrelin is what makes us hungry. And for me, I drink iced tea every day with ionic mineral solution, and it seems to just stave off the hunger. So typically when we're hungry, not every time, but some of the time, the hunger response can get triggered because we're low in minerals. So the ionic mineral solution for me is been an absolute savior. The days where I'm fasting and let's say I'm out of the house all day and I forget the solution, the hunger feels a lot more intense. I feel more tired and not as energized as usual. But with the ionic mineral solution, it's super easy to fast for 23, sometimes 24 hours. So let's talk about ghrelin. Ghrelin gets produced when we feel hungry. Now, there's a couple of types of ghrelin, okay? And one of the types of ghrelin increases the growth hormone in our bodies. Now obviously growth hormone is pretty good for muscle building. It's something that helps build new tissues faster and more efficiently. Ghrelin actually also increases BDNF. So we've spoken about that already. Extremely important that we figure out ways to increase BDNF as much as possible. Also improves insulin sensitivity. It also helps regulate the lipid and glucose metabolism. So obviously we're making the shift from glucose metabolism to fat metabolism, and ghrelin is responsible for mediating this shift as well. So as I mentioned previously, I've been able to reframe ghrelin. So when I feel hungry, I know that ghrelin is increasing in larger concentrations in my body, which means that growth hormone is going to go up, BDNF is going to go up, and I'm going to have all these benefits from an increase in the concentration of these compounds. And interestingly enough, ghrelin actually increases synaptic plasticity and improves memory. Again, I'm going to reference these studies in the links in the description if you want to check out some of the results from these studies, but I find this fascinating. So every time we feel hungry, we're actually improving the plasticity of the neurons and the synapses in our brain. This is obviously great for memory, great for learning, and something that you can use as a positive. So if you are going to try out intermittent fasting yourself and you get the hunger pangs, you can actually reframe it and think, actually, I'm getting some benefit from being hungry right now. So listen, I'm going to wrap things up today for this video. We know that intermittent fasting has some really potent benefits. We see this a lot in the rodent models and in the studies that have come out. It's actually a really popular way of living, and we now know that restricting your feeding, i.e. fasting, is one of the cornerstones of longevity because it has that hormetic stress on the body. We know that intermittent fasting has beneficial metabolic effects, neuroprotective effects, and something that I've not really mentioned in this video, but weight loss is a big one, right? So there have been studies done where people have eaten exactly the same thing, but they just shortened the window in which they were eating their foods, and they actually saw weight loss. So even eating the same foods, even if it was a really poor diet, if you restrict the eating window, by default you're going to lose weight because you're switching into fat metabolism, and you're going to start burning body fat in the process. Once again, guys, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritional expert. Don't take my advice as gospel. Make sure you go out there and do your own research. Now, one thing I'm going to finish on here, and this is fascinating, this idea of breakfast, right? Hunter-gatherers, did we have breakfast at hunter-gatherers? I would say no, right? Because breakfast was invented when cereal was invented. So this idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day actually came from an advertising campaign from Kellogg's, right? Kellogg's started producing cereal and they wanted to sell as many units as possible. So they was like, well, we can just throw this idea of breakfast out there. The same with the bacon industry as well. They did a similar thing with claiming that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and a breakfast of bacon and eggs or whatever is going to be the best thing for you. So I don't think we as humans should really be eating breakfast. I think fasting is offering benefits to all populations, and just cutting out breakfast is the easiest thing for most people to do. Have yourself a coffee if that's what you want, and that should be good until lunchtime. And for me, I don't eat until way round until 4 or 5 p.m. So anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap up this video right now. I hope this has been useful and informative and giving you some pointers to dive deeper on if you want to look at the science. And if you want to try out this yourself, highly recommend you go for it. So what I'm trying to do here really is I'm trying to live as long as possible. This is one of the mechanisms, one of the paths to do so. If you want to live as long as possible, if you want to live as healthily as possible, as disease-free as possible, and in the best condition of your life, I see intermittent fasting as one of the golden pillars that I think we should all be looking at adapting in our life. I think that we all eat too much food, and if we can cut out breakfast, most people are actually going to be in a caloric restriction, right? So they're going to have positive benefits of weight loss as well as all the things that we've spoken about in this video. Listen, thanks for tuning in. It's been a long one. I appreciate you sticking with me until the end. And until next time, catch you on the flip side. Peace.